So this is a Cropster class on roastery management. Whether you're using Cropster currently, or whether you're curious about Cropster, or even if you don't know anything about Cropster, but you're just looking to spruce up the operational excellence of your roasting company, you're in the right place. So I'm really pleased to see everybody here today. And I'm Marcus Young. My pronouns are he, him. And at Cropster here, I manage content and education. You might wonder, well, who is this guy to talk to me about roastery management? Well, I've been in coffee for about 20 years. And during that time, I've worked for a number of roasting companies. And I have also run two roasting companies of my own. I started Question Coffee, which is a roastery in Kigali, Rwanda. That's still running. It's owned by a US importer. Well, it's kind of independent, but it was a project started as part of an NGO grant with an importer, Sustainable Harvest. And I also started a Portland, Oregon-based roasting company called Central City Coffee. It was also a social enterprise. It was underneath the umbrella of a much larger local NGO or nonprofit, as we call them here. So I have some experience in what I'm talking about. I love roasting coffee. I love delicious coffee. I love happy customers. And I think really those things happen when all of these little operational and sort of business details are attended to at the best. So I got really passionate kind of thinking about operations, thinking about business. In my previous role as an authorized SCA trainer and consultant, where I was working with roasting companies and roasters large and small on their businesses. So it's great to be here. It's great to see all of you. Our agenda today, we're going to cover kind of a broad overview of operational tasks in a roasting company, including what happens kind of at the beginning of that workflow with both samples and managing green inventory. We're also going to talk about roast profiling and quality control and those tasks. And also talk about how does your customer-facing side of your business interface with production to make sure that you're roasting the right products at the right time for the right people. And I really want this session to be more than just me presenting to you. We'll see some demonstrations of Cropster just with some screenshots, of course, as well, to talk about how Cropster supports these tasks. But I really want to hear from you all as well, and we'll have ample opportunity throughout the session today to talk about some of your businesses, I hope, and some of your operational processes and some of your business tasks. And we'll just use the chat window for that. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to chat and share your comments with everybody. I'm also joined here today. You'll see our host of the session is Hannes. Behind the screen is actually my colleague, Nick. So I'll also call on Nick maybe sometimes to chime in with some of his experiences. And, since this is a Cropster webinar, I did want to start off just by talking a little bit about what Cropster is. So answering this question, what is Cropster? The simplest way to describe it is it's really the leading tool for managing your roasting company. It really is something that kind of runs throughout a coffee business as really the backbone of your operation. And it links all of these different tasks together. From green inventory to building production plans to all of the details that are required to execute excellent profiles and track roasts. It's a tool for managing quality control. It's a tool that can support your sales teams. Kind of ultimately, I guess, the goal would be to sort of save you time in the roast machine, save you time in the back office, and provide the resources to produce excellent coffee consistently. So, it's this tool that really can kind of help you make some informed decisions about your business. And we'll look at some use case scenarios as we go along. So that's a little bit about what Cropster is, and we'll get deeper into this as we go throughout our session. But as promised, I want to turn this over to you all a little bit, because there's a lot of steps that are involved when we roast coffee. a lot of activities that have to happen to get the green coffee into our hands as roasters, to roast that coffee, and then to get it out into the hands of our customers. And I just wanted to open it up from you all through chat to see if you wouldn't mind starting to type in some of the key operational steps that you deal with day to day in your roasting business. So I'm going to be quiet and let you all type some things into chat. All right, and Tom is coming right in saying batch planning. Yeah, that's a really big one. Tom, I'm going to want to come back to you a little bit later as we talk about that specifically to hear what your processes are right now. And we have Stephen here talking about green coffee storage and management. Yeah, absolutely. Green inventory as a part of that. My colleague Nick is chiming in with. Yeah, perfect. We have sensory skills and cupping. So that kind of leads into my next question that I had, everybody, which is some key sort of quality control steps that we need to take in our companies to ensure that we're providing a delicious product. That sensory skills and cupping starts with our green purchasing decisions and, of course, extends to the final product and its consistency. Yeah, great. Here's a good one. Planning for coffee lineups, quantity, timing, seasonality of coffee. Yeah, some of these are really fundamental to how coffee companies operate, right? We have companies that are fully focused on seasonality, where their blends are constantly changing and their blends are seasonal, and their single origin coffees are only fresh and in season, where others maybe, hold coffee a little bit longer. Great, all the green coffee quality steps coming from Tom, water quality, water activity, storage environments, all of those physical characteristics of green coffee, like water activity. Comments here about machine setup, bringing the machine up to temperature, like those tasks at the start of the day or between batches. Yeah, this is great. We have a really good list coming here. Well, let's take a look at these steps lined out kind of as I've defined them, and we can continue the discussion because certainly I've either missed things or you sort of have a different approach on them, and that's all right. But I think it's really helpful to lay out operations. And in my case, I'm going to break them down into what I call green coffee operations. This is sort of where it all starts, where I'm handling samples from my suppliers. You can see the left column here covers my production processes. The center is what I think of as the quality control steps that basically align with these tasks. And then that right-hand column is which modules are available in Cropster to support those tasks, to give you data collection for those tasks, to give you better visibility into these tasks. So as we have in the chat here, we have managing samples coming in, cupping and buying. So yeah, exactly. The steps of green coffee, I think it starts with samples, requesting samples, evaluating those samples, keeping track of those samples that you want to purchase. We're going to get into these steps in much more detail as we go through the system, but just to kind of lay out the broad overview. And from samples, of course, it goes to the coffee that you actually purchase and how you're managing that inventory, how that inventory might reside in multiple locations, and then also the storage conditions. And then on the Cropster side, we have everything from our ambient sensors. These are sensors that will measure temperature, pressure, and humidity in any room where you place them and report that right into your Cropster dashboard. So you get visibility in real time of what's happening with the ambient environment where you're storing coffee. And of course, we have modules for inventory and sample management within Cropster, and we have Cropster Cup that helps with that, the sensory aspect of all of it. So we'll get into that in more detail. But of course, that green coffee piece of it ultimately rolls into what I think of as kind of this central step, this kind of hub of what happens in a coffee roasting company. and that's managing orders and your roasting room. So this was great because I think, back here we had batch planning was one of the first things that Tom, who's on this session, mentioned. Well, the first thing that you need to do with your roasting day, right, is often receive orders, sort of aggregate those, build that production plan and that batch plan. So while it's not technically a roasting step, it's a really important step that somebody at your order desk or your production manager is probably undertaking, which then gets on to your actual production floor with weighing out your green batches, making a record of that. If you're doing blending before you roast, executing those pre-roast blends, of course, actually putting your pre-roast blends and your single origin coffees into the roaster and roasting them, recording your cooling time, going through some sort of a step with the destoner or cleaning of your roasted coffee, and finally issuing a weight report of that roasted product. Because when we look at the quality control steps in the middle, I think that those steps of matching a profile, following a curve, tracking time and temperature, following your between batch protocols, looking at your rate of rise, all of those are quality control steps. They're all steps to improve consistency, quality, and learning about your coffee. We also have weight loss and shrinkage. A key metric for consistency is how much weight did I lose from green coffee to roasted. My roast color, measured on an Agtron or an Espresso Vision or whatever tool that you have, to provide another measurement for consistency, and of course followed by your cupping and tasting. And then on the Cropster side, we have our Cropster e-commerce platform, and I'll show you some screenshots of these things, which helps manage the receipt and aggregation of order and building production plans. We have ambient sensors, again, that might be in your roasting room to provide you some data about the conditions of your green coffee, but also the conditions of the inlet air and inlet humidity as you start roasting. Within Cropster, we have all of our tools for roast profiling, for inventory, for quality. And then actually at the roasting machine, we have roasting intelligence, which we'll look at in more depth. And of course, this doesn't end at the roaster because we have all of these downstream steps after roasting, which gets us into the production tasks, grinding, packaging, fulfillment. So any coffees that are going to be blended after roasting, that's a fairly significant step that we have to undertake. Once you have also your roasted coffee that's prepared, that coffee is going to be staged and in some cases stored before it moves to the next step, which could be grinding and packaging and ultimately fulfillment. So getting those into your customers' hands. And that could mean getting them into boxes for DHL or FedEx to pick up, or your local postal carrier, or fulfillment might mean it goes into a van to go out to your customers hand delivered, or it may mean somebody's coming into your shop and picking up the coffee, but all important steps. And of course, quality control steps. If you're doing ground coffee, it's analyzing that particle size and grind consistency over time. For your packaged coffee, what is the residual oxygen, the bag integrity, those types of questions. If you're nitrogen flushing, how is that important? And ultimately, I think it comes down to cupping and tasting and making sure that you also have some methods in place and some QC steps in place to assess the final product. In my case, with Central City Coffee, we sold a lot of coffee through like specialty high-end grocery stores. And I would always empower anybody working for me to purchase a bag of coffee off the grocery store and bring it back to the lab so we could taste it, taste exactly what our customers are buying, make sure that coffee was being rotated. And on the Cropster side, again, we can capture a lot of this with quality metrics, quality measurements, cupping forms, and really link the quality of a finished product all the way back to a roast profile and a green coffee in our inventory. And same with the ambient sensors. In any sort of production room, those can be placed and be a valuable tool. So I know we covered a lot quickly. We're going to get into these in more depth. But based on your discussion, based on what we've laid out here, is there really anything major that's missing that doesn't fall into one of these categories, or anything that anyone here is doing that's unique that we should consider including in the future? All right, great. Well, we will just move along then. Tom Billings asks, is anyone color sorting yet? Yeah, that's an awesome step. Absolutely here. I mean, I'm based in the US on the West Coast near San Francisco. And I know of a couple of roasting companies that have here that have implemented color sorters for roasted coffee. The roasting company Counterculture is one that's color sorting roasted coffee. So that's going to lead to further weight loss, right? Something that you might want to track. I also know a roaster up in Oregon, Kova Coffee, in the US, that is using a densimetric sorter, so an Oliver table that you would see at a coffee mill, to further clean their green coffee prior to roaster and to further sort it based on density. So lots of things that folks are experimenting with and tinkering with in order to improve coffee quality. And capturing that data, I think, becomes even more important to see and understand what the value is of those machines. And I think, you know, in any case with all of these steps, when you look at Cropster, remember Cropster is this tool, this sort of backbone of a roasting company, like we've got you covered, because this is a screenshot here across the top just of the main menu in Cropster Roast Professional. And you'll see there is a module that covers samples. There's a module that covers all of the tasks related to green inventory. We have an orders module to help you gather those orders, aggregate those orders, and build production plans seamlessly. We have our roasting module, which shows you his historical roasts. It stores your roast profiles. It gives you all of that. And then we also have quality sessions and then detailed reporting. So we really are trying to cover what a roasting company is trying to accomplish day to day for various roles within that company. And let's get just a little bit into the weeds and sort of talk about samples in green coffee and a little bit more specifics about that. You know, and I'm always just curious to hear from attendees, especially, you know, as we talk to folks around the world, like, you know, how are you currently managing samples? How many samples are you receiving and evaluating in an average month? Do you sort of have a workflow built into your day-to-day along that? And then how are you providing feedback to your suppliers? So I don't know if anybody's interested and willing to share just a few comments in chat. I would love to see that. And I'm always happy to give some examples too from my work. I worked for, great, here's some, Ludwika saying spreadsheets and emails. Yeah, absolutely. I've lived in that world as well. You know, when I was working as a coffee trader and working with an importer, you know, we may have been evaluating 20, 40, 50 samples in a given day, which was just like staring at a fire hose, trying to keep up with samples. With my roasting companies, it was a little bit more manageable, but it was still a big task, right? Like I may call 2 or 3 different suppliers and say, hey, I need a coffee from Guatemala that comes in at this price, that's available at this time, and that has these sensory characteristics, right? That's dark chocolate and raisins and tangerine, yeah, just for an example. Well, that's great. If I call 3 importers and each importer sends me 5 to 10 samples, right? Suddenly I have probably more than 20 samples that I need to manage, cup, keep organized, make sure that I'm tracking the physical characteristics of that coffee, tracking what I taste in the cup with that coffee, logging all of those results, and then conveying to the importers what I want to purchase. And you know, that could be just the first step, because if I'm receiving samples directly from Guatemala, for example, well, those might just be offer samples. And maybe I approve one of those. Well, then I'm going to get another sample of that coffee before it ships, my pre-shipment sample. And then once that coffee arrives, I'm going to get my landed sample to finally approve. And then once it's actually delivered to my roastery on my delivery, I'm going to cup it again. So it's really important to be able to link these cupping sessions for a lot of coffee sort of throughout its life cycle and throughout the contract stages. And it can be a lot of data to keep track of in like just a spreadsheet. So where Cropster comes in, this is just a shot of the view of all of your samples. As you can see here, I have all of my samples organized. I'm able to sort them by the sample name, by the type of sample. Is it a spot offer? Is it an arrival? Is it pre-shipment? Is it an offer sample? I see the country that it's from and other supplier information that I'm able to track. And then I can see some physical characteristics of the coffee as well. I can see the moisture content. I can see the physical defect count, so primary and secondary defects. And I can also view the sensory score here. I think a good example on this view is the Nebi Zombo from Uganda, where I have my pre-shipment sample, which was at 11.6% moisture, a little high. You can see my defect count wasn't great, but the cupping score was quite nice at almost 85 points. But then when I received my arrival sample, well, the moisture is down a little bit. The physical defect count was improved upon from the pre-shipment, and my cupping score also showed an improvement. So at a glance, I can see how this coffee is performing over time, and I have more detailed reports that we can look at as well. So a lot of steps there. And I see Abby just typed in here into the chat as well, you know, that you just purchased an Ikawa, which is a great tool for evaluating samples. It's fast, it's efficient, it's quite repeatable and reliable. And as you're working to sort of try to correlate that info into Cropster, yeah, there is a little bit of a setup step, you know, a little bit of data entry that has to happen ahead of time. But I think the value when I see a report like this is pretty huge. But then also like sort of taking the memories of these coffees off my mind, because, you know, I might have cupped this coffee from Rwanda here, this Coco Puangere Kawa, and you know, maybe I didn't need this coffee this year, but maybe in 2 years' time, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I cupped a coffee from Rwanda. What the heck was it? I certainly could use that now. Well, I can go back and query my results of previous cupping sessions, perhaps find that coffee again, reach out to that supplier and see if it's available to sample now. And of course, you know, that's just managing the data. And, you know, what about cupping? We'll come to cupping a little bit later, because I want to cover that in kind of a larger discussion of quality control and sensory analysis, not just of green coffee purchasing, but also quality control of like the finished product. And what about green coffee, right? I mean, I can ask the same question again. You know, what are some of the challenges that you all face with managing your green coffee inventory? Does anybody want to share anything? I've got a little list here to get us started, because I think, you know, we have coffee that's in multiple locations. You know, a location could be as simple as a coffee that I bought on an importer's spot list, and I have 10 bags in my roastery, and I have 20 bags that are still at a warehouse somewhere, right? So I have access to 30 bags, but it certainly is helpful to know where those bags are. In a more complicated example, maybe I have some coffee that I have forward booked so that I'm expecting to land in a month or in 6 weeks. Well, I need to know what that coffee is and when it's coming. But also I want to know, of course, what's already arrived, what's at the warehouse, what's in my location. I think this idea of position reports, right? A position report is something that a coffee importer or a supplier would provide you, saying, this is how much coffee you have contracted, this is how much you've already taken, this is how much you still have available to pull. And those can come in all kinds of different forms, right? They can just come as a simple email report. It might be something that's been shared with you as a spreadsheet. Hopefully it's something that's shared with you within Cropster. But being able to compare my inventory and the position that I know that I have based on what Cropster is telling me to what my position reports are from importers is really valuable. Because as I'm planning my inventory needs, planning releases from the warehouse, planning future purchases, I don't just want to rely on what the importer is telling me, because those are going to come in different formats. I want one spot at a glance to see it. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. Managing blend components and single origin coffees, right? I mean, this is a complicated inventory trick because, what if that Guatemala coffee that I mentioned earlier, what if I know that that's going to be 40% of my drip blend, 70% of my espresso, and that I also sell it as a single origin coffee, and I'm planning to use it in my holiday blend. Well, that's one green inventory that's going multiple places. So having as much visibility into that and its usage as possible is really important. And I think we have a question here that they're in the middle of setting up their roasting company, not yet roasting, and they're unsure as to how many samples or how much green coffee purchases to start with. And that's a tricky forecasting goal when you're starting off, because it's just like, I know it feels like you're throwing a dart at a dartboard and hoping for the outcome. I think get to know your suppliers and your importers. Hopefully they're very generous with samples. I think when you're setting it up, the more samples, the better. But ultimately, I'd like to receive fewer samples. So as I get to know my importers, they know my taste, they know my quality standards. Hopefully, instead of sending me 15 samples where I want to buy 2, hopefully they send me 4 samples and I want to buy all of them, right? That just makes my business more efficient and makes them a more valuable partner. And so, the green inventory in Cropster, and this is where, sort of keeping good records is really important, because if I have logged all of my samples, in this case, a Brazilian Reina Fazenda, well, if this is a sample that I received, I roasted it, I analyzed it, I cupped it, with that sample, I captured, the sample weight that I received, that it was a spot offer, that there's 20 60 kilo bags available for me to purchase. Well, if I decide to buy that, I don't have to do that data entry again to move that coffee to my green inventory. I simply view the sample, I click on this manage button, and then I select add to green inventory. And it's going to ask me a few questions. It's going to ask me how much did I purchase? What did I pay for it? What location is that coffee? Where is that coffee located? And then also some questions about, when do I want to be notified of low inventory levels and things like that. And this is then how that translates to a snapshot view of my green inventory within Cropster. See, I can just pull up this page. I've got options to sort this data across the top by the name, by the location, by the country, which profiles it's used in. It tells me what my weight of coffee is. It also shows me what I've set as my minimum inventory level, what price I paid for it. So just as a snapshot, if I'm a green buyer or if I'm a production manager, every time I load up this page to look at green inventory, I don't have to run a complicated series of reports to get a snapshot of the basic information that I need. And if we just zoom in a little bit, because what we want to avoid is running out, right? And it's helpful to go look at your rack, look at the shelf in your warehouse and say, oh my gosh, I'm only down to 1 pallet of coffee. Well, before that happens, it's nice to be able to get a snapshot view of what's happening. And you can see right here, Cropster is helping me to predict when I'm going to run out of coffee. Is it in 4 weeks? Is it in 6 weeks? Is it in 5 weeks? So just at a glance, those coffees are highlighted. But if I dive in a little bit deeper, like in the case of the Ethiopia Gadeb, I can run a projection chart and a transaction history. So I can see when that coffee has been pulled and roasted and removed from my green inventory. And I can look at it over time. And I can also look at a projection of when I'm going to finally run out of that coffee. So a really, really helpful view at what's happening to your coffee inventory to help you plan. And then we do have more detailed reports that you can run. And I think this is where, when I talk about Cropster being a tool to the kind of most robust tool for managing a roasting company, it's these level of reports, because it's not just a green buyer, it's not just a production manager that needs to keep a track of green inventory and some of these tasks. Your accounting department is going to have questions about inventory. Your operations executives are going to want to know some of these details as well. So when I look at green inventory reports, you see I can get a general overview of how much total coffee by weight do I have available? What's the value of that? How many multiple locations is my coffee stored in? How many lots does that represent? How many are low in stock? And I can run further, more detailed reports and look at this information lot by lot, or by my various locations. Now, these are locations that you define on your own. So if you have one location that's your roasting plant, like, it's more and more common for folks to have roasting facilities in different cities, especially here in the US, like some of our famous roasting companies like Stumptown, Blue Bottle, Intelligentsia, they have maybe 3 or 4 roasting companies around the country. So each of those could be a location. But then also the warehouses you pull from, the importers you work with, whether that coffee has arrived or it's on the water, you can really be as granular in this as you need to be. And then we can also look at our inventory by the name of the coffee, not just the lot. So we can be even kind of broader there and really kind of cut this data in any way that makes sense to you. And these reports can all be exported to Excel and to be manipulated in different ways as well to help folks manage that. And I think really the power for this comes in is it's a starting point, right? You still need to occasionally take a physical inventory, walk around your warehouse once a month, once a week, just depending on your needs, and take a look and take account at what's in there. So this helps you to back that up. You can update these inventory numbers to make sure that what you're showing on hand is actually accurate and reflects what is physically available for you as a company. And so knowing what you have is really important. But I think even, of equal importance, of course, is knowing what the heck to do with it. And that's where profiles come in. Roast profiles, it's a term that we throw around a lot in coffee. But we don't often stop to sort of step back and think about, well, what exactly is a profile and why is it important? What are some of the key elements of a profile that make them important in my business? So feel free to jump into chat if you have some comments on this. But I think, for me to distill what is a roast profile, it's a recipe. It tells me how to roast my coffee. It's that simple. Of course, it becomes a little bit more complicated because we talk about a profile being that recipe, being that sort of stored, locked set of goals that we're trying to achieve. But then we also, when we step up to a roasting machine and we start roasting, the profile is also what's happening at that moment, at that instance in the machine. So it's sort of the statistical comparison about what's currently happening in the roaster against the recipe that we have stored. And why are they important? I am happy to be on the record making the claim that I think most customers want coffees that are consistent before they're delicious. Now, hopefully we're serving consistent, delicious coffee. I think they're both really important. But right, there's plenty of consumers out there that happily drink mediocre coffee because it's the same every single day. And so I think with profiles, they accomplish both of those things. A profile is absolutely a tool to help us roast consistently day to day, but also by keeping track of our data, by linking profiles to the green coffee that we're roasting, by linking profiles to the sensory results and the tastings of those coffees after they're roasted. We also have an opportunity to learn and to improve, because I might have a stored profile in a recipe and I taste it and I think, wow, I think that could be better. And by logging this and having this data record, I'm able to make that improvement. And what about the key elements of a profile? Does anybody want to chime in? If you think about a profile as a tool for consistency, what are some of the most important attributes of that profile? Yeah, perfect. We have folks coming in. Charge temp. Yeah, absolutely. That's where it sort of all starts to get you on track. Gas steps. So yep, how are you manipulating and changing your gas over time? I think we could add to gas any machine controls, right? Airflow or drum pressure, drum speed. Yep, there's air settings throughout. Steve says rate of rise. So yep, following that record of how fast is our temperature increasing over time is super important. Air settings throughout. I'm going to step back even further and sort of get away from the actual data log in the roaster, which is really important, and say, I think, a key component of a profile is roast color. Matching that roast color, whole bean and ground, roast after roast. Weight loss, right? Weight loss percentage. That's something that can be measured, something that's completely objective and that should be consistent roast to roast. But also, of course, stepping back into the roaster, batch size is a part of a profile. Time to various phases is part of that, right? How much time do we have from when we charge the coffee to yellowing, what we sort of commonly call the drying phase? Right, we've got that middle sort of modulation stage of the Maillard reaction from the time the coffee's yellow until we hit first crack. And then we have the end of the roast or the development time. So all of those, both as the time through those milestones, but also how they represent percentages of a total roast are key elements of a profile. And I think we kind of capture that here, right? But I would also add that cooling time is a part of a profile. Destoning and what you're losing from cleaning your roasted coffee, that could also get into that color analysis of roasted coffee. So all of these are really important. And, and the profile ultimately comes together in the cup, and we talk about the flavor profile of our coffee. And in Cropster, this is a look at where profiles reside. And a profile in Cropster, in some ways, it's like the nucleus of the system, because a profile is what lets you take a finished product, a product that a customer buys. It tells you what green coffee is used or coffees are used to build that product, and it tells you how they are roasted. So here you can see there's an example of several single origin or pre-roast blends that we have saved as profiles. We have a name for that profile. We have our preferred batch size. We have the machine that that profile is linked to. We have the green coffee or coffees that corresponds to it. So you can see at the bottom, we do have a pre-roast blend that's made up of Brazil, Kenya, and Ethiopia at 40, 40, 20% ratios. And then we also have the reference roast. So this is the recipe. So I've named my profile, I've identified which green coffee that's associated with. And then I'm saying, okay, this roast from the past was great. I loved the way it tasted. I liked the way that the machine operated. I felt like I was in control, and I'm going to set that as my recipe. So that's what that reference roast refers to. I can also build post-roast blend profiles. And a post-roast blend would be a series of single origin profiles that are then combined after roasting to build that post-roast blend. So you can see there's a second tab where that's captured. And this is what you're really looking at in Cropster in the cloud-based, browser-based system. The other piece of Cropster, and I think often this is what people think about when they just hear the name Cropster, they think about us as a tool that's a roast profiling software, right? I mean, clearly we're sort of showing that it's much more of a business management tool. But roasting intelligence, or RI, is the term that we have for the software that sits at the roasting machine on a computer that's plugged into that roaster. So it's taking real-time readings from various thermocouples in your machine, most commonly bean temperature and exhaust or environmental temperature, and creating a log, creating a chart, creating a record of every single roast on that machine. So that's roasting intelligence, or RI. And here's a screenshot of RI just from a demo. I will be the first to acknowledge, so that I don't get called out on it, that because this is from a demo account, my temperatures recorded on the right side don't match the temperatures on the curve. And also because I'm in the US, it's in Fahrenheit, which probably is driving everybody crazy. But let's just think more generally about what we're looking at here. This is a log of what's currently happening in a roaster from an instance of roast intelligence connected to a machine. And you see I have the gray lines in the background. That's my reference. That's the roast from the past that I'm trying to duplicate right now. And you can see the red curve at the top that represents my exhaust temperature. You can see I'm pretty close to on target, running just a little bit hotter. The blue line, the kind of like Nike swoosh, that is the bean temperature thermometer over time, where you can see it's also running just a little bit hotter. And you can see then the rate of rise, which is that sort of peak at about 2 minutes that's now been declining. So I'm getting a look at a lot of data of what's currently happening in the roaster. You can also see it's tracking the drying phase, because I haven't yet marked color change for this roast. And I think most interesting in some of our newest features is we have some predictive elements. It's actually incorporating artificial intelligence to predict what's going to happen in my roast over the next 2 minutes. So you can see the extension of my bean temperature and my rate of rise over 2 minutes. And you can also see, because as I'm approaching first crack, it's attempting to predict when I'm going to experience first crack for this coffee on this roast. So some really powerful tools there to help guide you through making machine adjustments to make sure that you're able to duplicate a profile time and time again. And one thing that's not shown here, but I think most roasters have read and sort of understand the concept of the flick. That would be a kick up in rate of rise towards the end of a roast, typically, as you approach that sort of exothermic reaction where the beans are starting to contribute heat to the system. We also have flick prediction now, where you'll actually get an alert on the screen on RI saying, hey, you might be running into a flick. You might want to make some adjustments to your gas to prevent that from happening. So it's a pretty darn powerful tool where you're getting that reference versus the real-time data, where you've got these time and temperature curves, rate of rise, modulation and marking progress. And something that's not shown on this particular screenshot, but depending on the roasting machine you're connected to, you can also actually control the machine from within Cropster. So we have gas control and airflow control. And on some machines, we also have replay. So if you have a profile that you like and you have it dialed in, you can just click replay and it'll replay those gas and air changes in an attempt to make your roasting a little bit more of a robot. You still need to stand there, guide it, make sure you're making adjustments. And Tom is asking what the smart predictions take into account. It takes into account a lot of artificial intelligence and a lot of information over a lot of roasts from folks that participated. So can't go too much deeper into that. But once you've executed a roast, or if you're a production manager, you can step back to your browser and you can see a record of all of the past profiles, right? These are all syncing into the same database, into the same cloud. And I can go and I can take a look at profiles historically. So you can see what's been roasted today, how it's been roasted, where it was roasted, the time, who the roast operator was, which machine it was roasted on. I get full visibility into where my coffees are at any given time coming out of the roaster and perhaps ready for next production steps. And I think in a lot of ways, as somebody who's very concerned with consistency and quality, a really powerful piece of this is just zooming in on some of that data, is that when you create profiles, you can set goals for those profiles. And anytime a goal is missed, that coffee is flagged so that you can give it extra attention. You can give it an extra look on the cupping table, an extra look with your color meter, whatever methodologies you have in place. And you can set up goals of any kind. So here you can see it's not a very good day at my roastery because a lot of my coffees are highlighted red. So that means I missed some goals. And goals could really be any number of things. Did my weight loss not match the expectation? Was my sensory results off? Or even right away out of the roaster, right? Was the roast value or the roast color different than what I expected? Was the duration of my roast too long or too short? I can even set it for specific phases. If I expect my development time always to be 14%, and for this roast it was 14.75%, well, I could set that level of specificity to red flag a roast. So you can define your own goals, you know your business, you know what's important for your consistency and quality, and it's a really powerful tool to show you, well, what needs a little bit more analysis. And when I really want to dive into and look at roasts and compare roasts, I can do that as well. From that list of roasts that have already happened, I can select multiple roasts and overlay them on top of each other, which is what we're looking at here. And so if I dive into this a little bit, I can compare the curves. So clearly these curves are a bit different, right? We can see that the red roast was running a little bit hotter on the air temperature and the rate of rise sort of in the middle. But by the end of my roast, I was actually behind, right? It was a longer roast. I think it was about 40 seconds longer than the blue roast. So this is starting to tell me quite a bit because maybe these coffees had the same roast color, but I would bet that they actually tasted different. And so same thing, I can dig in here and I can take a look at, well, what happened to the gas from one roast to the other? And in this case, I can see, whoa, okay, my gas inputs were pretty different. I mean, maybe some of that's explained by looking at the curve. You know, I can see, I think, you know, somebody mentioned in the chat that charge temperature was really important part of a profile. Well, no wonder these profiles don't match because the charge temperature on the blue profile was a little bit hotter, both the bean temp and the exhaust temp. So you can see the sort of results of that in the gas input. But then I can also see this modulation chart, which I think is really interesting because, you know, looking at this, it's like, well, okay, we had the exact same amount of time drying. So until that color change, it was 5 minutes, 55 seconds. We also had the exact same Maillard time, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. But because one of the roasts went significantly longer, if we break these down into percentages of the total roast, you'll see that they're actually quite different. Where we had a much longer development time with the red roast, which PR263, which meant that we had much shorter as a percentage drying time and Maillard times. So my hunch is that that coffee will taste different. And we can even capture that in the same view as well, just as we're looking through the data. You can see these coffees have been cupped. They actually cupped at the same score, but the descriptors are very different. So 263 certainly sounds like the more appealing coffee to me. But here you can compare the duration, where 263 was the longer roast, where that development time was really extended as a percentage of the total roast time. You can see ending temperatures were higher on the red roast. So you can really break it down. And also here you can see my ambient sensor readings. So I can compare when the room was hotter, when there was more humidity, and when the ambient environmental pressure was also higher. So a lot of data just right here at a snapshot to let me know what might have happened with the coffee. And another huge part of consistency in my roasts is being consistent between batches, from one batch to the other. And we call that between batch protocol. And what we've started to do in Roast Intelligence is we now capture what's happening in that interim time between like the first batch of a coffee, the second, the third. And you can see we're charting the temperatures between batches. We're also giving some between batch protocols just as raw data. So, it's 2 minutes, 54 seconds between batches. We're recording gas and airflow changes, lowest temperature, highest temperature, really with the goal being, I come back to this profile, to avoid the situation when we're starting in such a different, with such a different state in the roasting machine. Because if you're going to always be playing catch up if that happens. So between batch protocol is a really important tool for consistency, especially as you're getting into batch to batch to batch roasting. And as you use it regularly, it becomes a really important tool also to understand, well, how are the conditions in the roaster changing as my roasting machine heats up throughout the day? So a really exciting feature that we have there that I think a lot of folks have kind of sometimes forget about. So I'm super happy to see it as somebody who roasts a lot of coffee. And then, of course, as I said, I think, other aspects of a profile that are super important, key quality metrics would be roast color, whether you're using an Agtron or a Javalytics or just SCA color tiles, the ability to objectively measure the color of your whole bean coffee and your roasted coffee is so important to consistency and quality control. And that's one of those goals that you can set for your profiles to be reported and to red flag those roasts that maybe haven't gone quite as planned. Same thing with weight loss, right? If you're expecting a 15% weight loss every single time you roast your Kenya Nyeri and you have a batch where it comes out at 17% weight loss, well, I want that red flag because I bet it's going to taste different. Either that or somebody screwed up something on the scale. Hopefully that's the case and it tastes the same. But I like having these tools to help me understand where things went wrong. And how do we get this now all into, right? We've talked about green inventory. We've talked about roasting and profiles. Well, what about this production planning step, right? What about this major piece of it where we're going to receive orders from a lot of different customers, right? Some are going to come in by email. Some are going to come in as a text message. Some are going to come in by a phone call. Sometimes somebody's going to just like leave you a post-it note on your door when you come in the morning. I've seen it all. I bet some of you have too. And so really the challenge is, right, we have all of these different products in different formats. Some are whole bean, some are ground, some are large bulk bags, some are retail bags, some might be fractional packs that are going to a hotel. Well, how do we match those up to the profiles, right? How do we know how those coffees need to be roasted, and ultimately which green coffee we need to pull to accomplish it? So it's tough, right? Because you're getting orders from multiple locations. Some are going to consumers, some are going to your wholesale accounts. You've got various package sizes. You have single origin coffees that are being sold as single origin and also as blend components. You have pre-roast blends, right? So geez, how much green coffee do I need to pull just to accomplish this production day? Right? There's a lot of math there. If anybody wants to share how they're currently sort of building their production plans in the chat, I would love to hear it. Because it's often a pretty major job at the roasting company to sort of take all of these orders and aggregate them into a plan that you can actually execute when you're standing at the roasting machine. I know with Question Coffee, any given production day, I could easily plan on half an hour to more than an hour and a half to build all of these orders, right? I needed to understand the weight loss, so I knew how much green coffee to pull to produce the right amount of roasted coffee. I needed to know where profiles were going. If it's a Guatemalan, it's 40% of my house blend and 60% of my espresso blend, and I sell it as single origin. Well, I need to do that math to figure out how much of this Guatemala do I need to roast today. And at Cropster, we've kind of got that covered with a couple of different options. Anybody with Roast Professional has the ability to manually enter orders into their system. So in this case, my order desk would just be gathering all of those orders. Yeah, here's somebody saying it takes Ludwika, it takes an hour or two plus adjustments as new orders come in. Yeah, it's a bunch of time. And so one of the ways that we're solving for that in Cropster is you can just click order, add order, and boom, I can enter, in this case, a purchase order number from Tammy's Donuts. It's a wholesale customer. I record the salesperson that entered this, and then I just go through and say, okay, they needed 15 retail bags of Ethiopia and 10 bulk bags of Ethiopia and 20 bulk bags of my espresso blend. They wanted all whole bean. And then as I work through it, I just build my order. We've also taken it and tried to make it even simpler by coming out with a product called Cropster e-commerce. And e-commerce does a couple of things for you. One of the things is we can provide you with like a full-fledged wholesale store. But even if you're not going that route, if you have a current store that's based in WooCommerce or based in Shopify, we can pull those orders right in. And I'll show you what that looks like. But here's an example of a web store, right? I'm logged in, I'm a customer of the coffee roasting company, and I'm just adding the coffees that I need to order. You know, I want 10 bulk bags of house blend, and I need 7 bulk bags of my Colombian, and I'm also gonna order some ground filter coffee of that. And I can just build my orders and send it to my roaster. So one place where all of your orders can be aggregated, so that then, instead of just adding the orders manually, now all that I have to do is click synchronize, and you can see these orders have come in from my online web shop. And it's just listing all of those orders, who the customer was, what products they ordered. And with one click of a button, I just can select all of these orders and convert them to a production schedule. I get that. So now in a quick review, a click of a button, I have now taken all of these disparate orders and I've now linked them to which profiles need to be roasted on which machine, in what quantity, and from which green coffee do I need to pull. So from that 1 or 2 hours of planning to now a little bit of training to get your wholesale customers and your retail customers to order more online, and you build a production plan almost instantly. And then from this, you actually build your roast schedule, which in turn, this is what your roasting team will see when they step up to roasting intelligence. They'll just have a list of coffees and just click 1, click 2, click 3 as they go through their roasting day. And it just executes those roasts for them. It tells them exactly which green coffee to pull, how much to pull, and which profile to link it to. So it's a really, really powerful tool, which, ultimately it's also not just what the roaster's doing, but, out of the roaster, we have all of these coffees that are in buckets and waiting to be ground or put into bags and filled into boxes. And we have reports for that as well. So this is what a production report looks like, where your folks that are downstream from the roaster can also get started first thing in the morning and say, well, okay, here's my orders for the day. Colombia, Hormiguero, I need 30 12-ounce bags and 35-pound bags. And they can just start making those bags. And then as the first batches come out of the roaster, they can see, well, how much needs to be ground, how much is whole bean, and what goes into which bag. So we kind of have it covered all the way end to end, so that you get your folks working efficiently. And then, of course, cupping in QC. I know that we're running right at the end of time. But of course, we already talked about green coffee and samples and how you're probably going to use something like the SCA form for buying and cupping. But there's also alternative cupping forms that you may be using, Cup of Excellence or a simple like pass-fail form for production. And then ultimately like sharing those results as well. And in Cropster, Cropster Cup, you can enter your results directly into Cropster on your computer in a browser, or you can download the Cropster Cup app and actually cup in real time, recording your scores and your sensory professions. And then ultimately, all of these quality control sessions can be reported on, right? So you can compare coffees, you can compare cuppers, you can compare lots, you can compare profiles that have been cupped, and they produce reports like this. So this is an example of a report that perhaps I'm sending back to a supplier where they sent me a sample that I'm thinking of buying. And you can see here's the results from the various cuppers, including our average. Here's the descriptors we came up with. Here's a spider diagram of our scores. This could also contain all of the physical characteristics, the defects we found, the screen size, the water activity, the humidity, moisture content, etc. So really powerful because to my mind, sharing your results is super important. It's respectful. It also makes your business run more efficiently. It's that example again where I would rather have a supplier send me 3 samples where I like all of them than a supplier send me 20 samples where maybe I like 2 of them, right? It's just more efficient for everybody. So sharing results easily is a huge step. So just for a quick review, right? We've gone through a lot. There is a lot that goes into producing excellent and tasty coffee. And I think this is just a simple view of it because if you really explode it, you can see there is, and we could probably build on this even, but there's a lot that happens to make great coffee. So we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. I'm available to answer some more questions if you have them. But also, I just wanted to thank you all for joining me today. This is super fun. I love these kinds of sessions and the discussions that we've had. And I encourage you all, if you want to learn more about Cropster, if you're a current Cropster user and want to kind of understand how to get the most out of your account, or if you're new to Cropster and you'd like to talk to someone and have a demo, you can do that here. Just scan this QR code and it'll take you directly to our booking page where you can book a demo or a meeting with our customer success or our sales teams. Or you can just go to cropster.com/contact/book-a-demo and you'll get routed to the right person. So any questions before we wrap up? I really appreciate everybody's feedback and comments throughout the morning or afternoon in your case. Great. Well, I do see that we have a question about, what file types are available with Cropster if you want to use it solely to add data, but still want to download reports. So, and we have a number of reports, lots of our information, you can just report right directly within the system. And it's very easy. Once you have a Cropster account, you can add multiple users that have their own sort of view of the information they need. But a lot of the data can also be downloaded as Excel file. In the case of like cupping reports and things, those are PDFs that are more visual and graphic. So lots of different file types that can be exported and manipulated. Great. Well, I see some thank yous coming back, and I want to extend a thank you to you all. It's great to see so many friendly faces here and some familiar faces, and I really appreciate everybody's time today. This was great. Look for future webinars. You can check out recordings of past sessions and webinars with guests, and really don't hesitate to book a demo, take advantage of our team to help guide you with your use of Cropster to get the most out of it that you can. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.